Hello there, this is the voice of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, a series of 12 remarkable conversations that I'm having with male soul stewards from all over the world, these extraordinary men who are transmitting unconditional love, empathy, and vast waves of spiritual intelligence, encouraging us, inspiring us, enthusing us into living a new level of living, and thereby creating a brave new world. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm introducing you to the wonderful Jarrad Hewett. And I'm just as usual going to formally introduce him by sharing with you his exquisite bio. So Jarrad is a #1 best-selling author of 4 books, including his latest USA Today bestseller, The Answer is Energy, and Amazon's #1 Love, Life, God, The Journey of Creation, The Gospel of You, and The Big E, Everything is Energy. I just love Jarrad's titles. As a multidimensional energy expert, Jarrad specializes in the visionary teaching of advanced healing energy work that allows profound reconnection at every level of being. He is a bridge for consciousness, an awakener of souls, a catalyst for high-level vibrational change that brings quantum growth, abundance, healing, and jubilant manifestation into the lives of millions of people around the globe. In other words, the transformational energy he channels brings change that goes far beyond the 3D reality, opening the self to its truest and most connected experience of divine love. Jarrad has appeared on virtually every single major network in America, including Fox, ABC, CMT, and HGTV, and was recently profiled on Australia's Studio 10 for his energetic abilities and success within the entertainment industry. I love it for his energetic abilities. Beautiful. So welcome. I'm absolutely thrilled that you're
Thank
here.
You, sir. It's wonderful to be here. That was you did not lie. That was a great bio.
That was a great bio. I mean, I've cobbled it from your wonderful website, and I thought I'd add in a little bit of my own flourish just to...
Jubilant. Yeah, I'm cribbing off of you next time I go out someplace. I'm going to add that.
I'll send this to you because I just couldn't resist, because I know that your energy work is super energy proponent. And I know, therefore, that you're really connected with the fineness of feeling as the language of the soul, but are moving into those incandescent feeling states of delight and jubilance and transformation on transcendent levels. So I couldn't resist by putting in a few superlatives like that.
It was brilliant.
Well, bless you. Thank you. So where did it all begin?
In the beginning, Stewart, in the beginning, which there was no beginning. So we're to let's wrap our hearts and minds around that. For me, it began actually in the state of Oklahoma in the United States. Had an interesting journey. Those of you who may not be familiar with me, I see things, hear things. Matter of fact, we may get some little orbs. When Stewart and I were chatting earlier, they were all over the place. So it's just kind of, that's been my life experience. It's everybody on my mother's side, her mother, her mother's mother, her mother's mother. They all had, whether it was like precognition through the dream state, or what they would have kind of termed gypsy abilities, or in that sort of derogatory way, because it was, that looked down upon. And they all, interestingly enough, married into mostly sort of Pentecostal, but very, very conservative religion. So 2 of them at one point got locked away so that their husbands could go do something else. And then when they got out, they married into Southern Baptist preachers. So it was interesting sort of marriage and dance between the esoteric and the energetic, and the enlightened and the awakened, cobbled in with, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but maybe a little bit of the fear-based nature of what comes through that patriarchal control system that existed, in the late 1800s, 1900s for them through religion. And so through all of that came this being named Jarrad, or I like the way Stewart says it better. But anyway, that was my experience. So when I was born, I could see things, I could I could hear things. I kind of had this, everything looked very different to me than what everyone else would explain their perception and what they were seeing was. And I had this kind of thing where I could just kind of cut through the BS. And that did not go over very well in my family. And so my mom particularly was very fearful. And so I was taught very, very early on, like, you're a freak, don't, like, that's it, the words she would use was Satan. So and I remember I grew up in Christian school, and I would say, well, how is Daniel a prophet, but I'm something different, when it's basically we're talking the same things if you want to take those stories literally. So it was a lot of cognitive dissonance in the space where I grew up in, and that manifested. I physically, by the third grade, I was about 110 pounds overweight. At some point in high school, my freshman year, I was a little over 300 pounds. So I was eating to ground and eating my feelings and trying to find that sweetness and the savory of life that just wasn't there for me. It manifested again around that same time period, second, third grade. I had ulcers. I'd broken at that point all of my bones, not all of them, but quite a few of them several times. My one arm 3 times, one arm 4 times, both of my legs, several toes, fingers, stitches everywhere. So lots of accidents, just because I had this belief that I was an accident, that I was broken, that I was disconnected. So therefore it manifested in lots of disconnected sort of functions in my body. And that's really what got me to, eventually I literally closed down my energetic heart, didn't want anything to do with any of it. Tried to live only from the mind. Obviously, we know that doesn't always go well. And it didn't in my case either. It actually physically started shutting my heart down. And so after a couple of years of what, doctors had said was sort of PTSD and depression and agoraphobia, with, wearing heart monitors and things like that all the time, I remember laying there one day and I just said, okay, I'm going to just sort of energetic suicide. Like, I quit. Like, I'm not going to fight. I just quit. If this is it, I don't want it. And it just sort of, everything kind of that I'd had as a child just came right back. And it was like, it's all energy. Everything that you believe, if you'd have been born 10,000 miles away to a different family with different beliefs, what part of you would be you and what part of you would be completely different. So there's that space of what is divine and what is true. And not that it's not all divine, because it's all chosen and, it's all our experience. But in that space of who am I from my own divine core and my essence? And that was something that when I learned to tap into that, everything else in life began to just kind of melt away and move away. And it took a few years working through a lot of the physical issues that I had. But they were all sort of connected in very deeply to core beliefs that I held about who I was, about what was appropriate or what was right within the context of the world and religion and power and, God itself, himself, herself, whatever, your belief may be around that. So unspiraling all that I had been in this life, to really get to the essence of who I was and who I am. And then getting to the point of comfort with being able to take who I am out into the world. That took a little bit more, because there's, I think at a collective level, we can tune into those, whether it be from, the Salem witch trials or the story of the crucifixion, or even, John Lennon getting shot in New York. There's all of these archetypes of when people step into their power, or when people step out of what is the norm, what happens to them. And so those were all things that I dealt with. And just sort of sloughing all of that off, that was sort of the ever evolving becoming of who I am now. And so that was a bit of a longer way to answer where did it begin. But for me, that is where it began. It began with kind of feeling very, very cramped, and then trying to live within the confines of that cocoon, and then realizing that cocoon was there to give me the resistance so I could create the wings to eventually move out from that space and fly free, butterfly, fly free. So that's my story.
Wow, what a story. If I seem a little bit strange, there's a huge delay going on in what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. So I'm seeing you speaking, but you're not speaking, etc., etc. So as you reveal your story and you speak of the butterfly unfolding your wings and flying, Did you have any specific external direction that was given to you? I mean, was there a pastor at church or a teacher at school, or, you know, the beings that were looking after you? Were they unseen beings? What gave you the direction? Because, you know, what you've enunciated for us feels a little bit pell-mell, that you were going through these radical initiations that were affecting you physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually.
So I actually, I had a professor who was a Jesuit in college, I think maybe my sophomore year. And that was the first time that I'd ever been really challenged to look at why I believed what I believed, whether it was, you know, because it had been taught to me, or if it was, it's basically the sociology of the sociological anatomy of who we are as a human being is kind of how I would phrase it now. But I always had Saint Germain, who I know you are feel a great kinship and connection with as well. I had that very much so. Jesus, Buddha. I mean, my mom will tell you there were times that I would be talking to someone in the backseat of the car at 4 years old. You know, who are you talking to? You know, I'm talking to Jesus. So I had those, but that was the reason that it was like, I don't know who this kid is, but he needs to pipe down because, you know, that's not normal. So yeah, but and then, you know, eventually I also saw dead people. So for her, that was kind of once. I never really knew my grandfather. And after he had passed, so he came through with some things when I was helping them clean out and move, and I relayed them to her. And after that, she was just kind of like, okay, I believe, but I don't want to hear it. But it was mostly people, but also through books. And I mean, I shared the story in one of my responses. And this was maybe 15 years ago. I was starting to step out and speak into the world. I emailed you just because of the things that I did in the voiceover industry. And I remember I got a little freaked out by your email. And first of all, I didn't expect a response, but I had heard you on something and just loved the voice. And it was more around the vocal stuff. And I emailed you, and you emailed back and said, the angels gave me your name in a dream, and you know, you were going to do this magnificent work. And so there were all these things. So, I mean, I always bless you for that, because that meant so much to me at that time, because it was I was going through such an interesting process of kind of knowing and having this vision for where things were going, but on the physical side, not really feeling connected to it and not sure how to get there. And I think a lot of that was I just hadn't dropped a lot of the things I needed to drop to sort of see through the eye of that needle. But it was a lot of introspection, but a lot of just tuning in and tapping in and having that external guidance. But then I went to things like the I Am discourses, which were written in the early 1900s, different literature, but also studying history and studying psychology. It just really gave me, I'm kind of a self-starter and a self-motivator. And to me, looking back at history and realizing that, you know, to crib from Battlestar Galactica, all of this has happened before. And they go on to say all of this will happen again. But it's just the human story and the inevitability that, you know, the things that we all face in our experiences. And while we take them so personal, they are not always unique. And so how can we take from the experiences of others, not take in the hearted way, but how can we discern from the experiences of others so that we can grow and change course, so that all of those things that have happened before don't have to happen again, that we can create something brand new. And so that's always been my goal. I've always had kind of a vision for a greater space of humanity. And in the energy sort of world, a lot of times, and I think when I started out, I think I went to, I retreated a little bit into myself because I didn't want to be in the world. Going back to, and I don't mean to quote scripture as much, but it just keeps coming up in this way. But you know, Jesus saying, "Be in the world, not of the world." Well, to me, I didn't even want to be in the world. I didn't know how to distinguish the difference. And once I realized that everything, I'm going to say like up here, everything that I learned energetically really was not integrated and able to be used to the fullest capacity until I could become and embrace the physicalized expression and existence of who I am. That made, no pun intended, a world of difference, because it created a whole new space. You know, it wasn't just about trying to escape an illness or escape a debt or escape bad relationships or old abuse. It was about actually being able to take the tools and the things that I knew and put them into a physicalized space and create, you know, going back to Gandhi, to be the change. Not just wish for it or hope for it or pray someone else does it, but to actually, and that was such a thing I didn't want to live in life. You know, I wanted to sit back as a Capricorn and maybe direct a little bit and enjoy the symphony. I didn't want to be an active participant. And I had to really learn that that is part of what mastery and creation is. And once I stepped into that, my whole life blew open in the best way possible.
So would you describe yourself as a hermit?
I would describe myself as an extroverted introvert. I'm actually Myers-Briggs. I would be an INJF. I think the hermit aspect of that comes from, I really, when I work and when I'm with people, I'm very energetic and I'm very giving and I'm tuning in and doing all of these things. And when I finish up at the end of the day, my dog is sleeping right over here. You may see her wandering around when she wakes up. But for me, it's just, I like to, you know, sit by the fire, read a book, be with my pet, you know, throw the ball, swing in the backyard. Just, so yeah, I think hermit is kind of this like, to me. And we'll talk about too, how words mean different things to people as we get into this, because it's interesting how we associate and then we label and then we react. But I would say I tend to avoid, and at a younger age, very much so, because I had agoraphobia. So being around people, but I didn't realize that that was more about my ability as an empath, that I was just feeling everyone else's stuff. And I didn't realize this until much later. I could feel everyone else's stuff, but I was always, through my own perception of the world and myself, choosing to tune into their sort of lower vibrational crud, we'll call it. And I learned later on that actually there was a space where I didn't need to tune into it at all. And it was like a remote control with a TV channel. I could pick what I wanted to tune into if there was a greater need to tune in at all. But I also had to really learn that I could let go, that it wasn't my job to save the entire planet. Now, I don't mean by that to condemn the entire planet. What I mean is that once you let go of that desire or sort of the ingrained belief of having to save, that sort of salvation template, you actually then open yourself up to doing so much more to help uplift people, because you're no longer working from sort of that dualistic victim savior complex polarity. It's more of a, you have shed the belief that you have to and that you must, therefore the attachment is gone, therefore you're able to tune in and bring all of yourself present without mixing those energies that start to pull you down. And then you can stand there as the beacon, sharing your light and help uplift in that way. I think I got a little off track there, but yes, I'm a hermit.
Which, you know, is meant as a celebration. It's one way of being able to define the archetypal nature of your being, because you're obviously of the world as well, because you're immensely creative, I mean, prolifically creative, and very much, you know, you're so charming in the way that you, and so loving and gracious about the way that you communicate your information in the world. So that is established by being willing and gregarious and fun-loving in terms of sharing information and seeing the response that one gets. But of course, at the end of the day, it's so wonderful to be able to fold into one's own juices and just simply be at one in a solitary capacity, but in a very celebrated solitary role with the divine. And many mystics have done this over the years. I mean, they still do, you know. I'm very much of this vibe as well, which is why I understand it, you know. And we're both earth signs, you know. Capricorn is a very familiar sign to me. I'm a Taurus, and you're
we get along fantastic then. Yeah, no wonder.
And one of my brothers a Capricorn, and we're reconnecting with in our relationship, having not seen each other for many years. And that's quite interesting, you know, because suddenly there's a gap of 40 years and now we're making up. And also one of my dearest artist friends, who was the artistic director of Shakespeare's Globe, is also a Capricorn. So I understand the inquisitive mind of the Capricorn. So, I mean, how did you find Global Pause? I guess you were very busy with your family, were you?
I was, yes. So I actually, moving out to Los Angeles, that kind of, I think I kind of moved over that. So that was where I moved out and kind of really got into my own. And that was how I got into the world of voiceover and commercials and TV shows and narration. And I actually started out on camera. One of my very first jobs was a commercial, and it was me, Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, Steven Spielberg, Eddie Izzard, and there was another character actor. And but it was like a 19-hour day shoot. It was on the set of a show called Las Vegas that it was like James Caan and Josh Duhamel. I loved that show. It was a really fun show. So I was just having this amazing time doing it. But it was like a 19-hour day. I got there and I think I gained like 7 pounds from the audition to the time. So my wardrobe didn't fit. And I got a little bit chastised for that. And at the time I was also doing, in America, we have a restaurant chain called White Castle. And they made some movies about it with Neil Patrick Harris and I forget the gentleman's name, but he served as sort of the arts liaison under President Obama. But the movie was all about just basically getting stoned and eating hamburgers. And I was the voice of that chain at the time. And I remember I got a check for that. And I'd moved to LA. I still wasn't ready to kind of completely be free, but I knew I was going to go into entertainment law. And I had moved there telling everyone that's what I was going to do so that I could still have their approval. I wasn't quite ready to shake the boat too much, but I ended up working in that industry. I got my first check and I went, that's more than I'll make in a year, practicing, not going to go to law school. So after that first shoot, which was an amazing experience to even say that I worked with those people, I just decided no on camera for me. But that was also an issue for me because I didn't want to be seen. So I really had to kind of work on that. But I think that again goes to that Capricorn. Am I safe? Is it safe? And I had to really just realize that I create it all. And so work on my own inner landscape. So I moved back to Oklahoma when my dad got dementia. There was a lot of lawsuits, and he had basically blown his life savings on prostitutes and pills and all of that kind of stuff. And so got my mom moved in. She lives about 4 houses down right now. But during the global pause, it didn't change much for me because my sort of daily routine was checking on him, checking on her. At the time I was doing sessions with people for about 3 or 4 hours a day and, doing those all from here. And so I actually found it there was a lot of potential. You'll understand what I mean, and we can explore this if you'd like. There was a great potential for people to really step back from life and see it probably how, in a way that I see it and you see it as the earth signs and as the mystics, being able to really tune into the heart rather than kind of see the difference it is of being out in the world versus being out in the world, but of the world. And I felt like it was a great time to really self-reflect on who we've been, why we've been that way, who we are and why we are that way, and who we want to become. And I will say, and I don't mean in the terms of right or wrong, I just mean in the context of sort of the global energy as we see it right now. I think that collectively, we didn't quite take that pause at a large enough level. We're still being asked to really evaluate some things very clearly. And we will continue to evaluate until we come to the place where we can merge that space of, when you and I spoke initially, one of the things that we talked about was, I talked about divine love and sort of defining divine love from the space of wanting to do no harm to self. We start at kind of the basic level, the sort of, we'll call it a lower vibrational level, even though it's not a hierarchy, it's just that sort of the starting place. As when we're coming out of pain, that's kind of the first space we can move into, is where we no longer want to harm ourselves and we no longer want to harm anyone else. And from that place, we can grow into a space where we're ready to celebrate ourselves and to celebrate other people. And as a collective, as the world, we're still sort of shook on what it is to love the self and what it is to love the other. And again, going back to my early education in religion in the book of John, Jesus is being quizzed by the lawyers, and they're saying, we have all of these rules. What do we, what are the actual, there's the Old Testament laws, there's the 10 Commandments, there's all of these rules and all of these other religions. What do we really have to do to go into the kingdom of heaven, which I believe is the space of the open heart made manifest wherever we may be? And the reply is, and this goes back to, who and what God is. And for me, God is everything. And it's love God with all thy heart and love thy neighbor as thyself. That's it. So if you have the perception and the understanding that God is the energy which forms everything, creates everything, basically the universe itself, the universal field, and what creates the universal field, there is that cosmic energy of divinity and light. And so if you can love that, and then if you can love others as the self, well, that gets into how we love the self. And there's oftentimes we have so much self-doubt or self-angst, or we see ourselves in direct opposition to other. And so we create labels and we put them in groups, and we create ideologies around why these people are bad or why we're good. We create sides, all of these things. And so for me, the greater idea behind the global pause was to step out of that space of other and really begin to see what is it that we want life to become. And for me, that base teaching is if we can love, I mean, going back to the song, love is all you need. And I know people say, and I would have said this as well, because at one point I was about $100,000 in debt. We had a writer strike in around 2007-8. And so the entertainment industry ground to a halt. And I would have said, well, love isn't going to pay my bills. Yet, ironically, when I could move into a space, I've said this before, when talking about money, when I got to the space of actually, rather than like feeling like a victim of the banking system and feeling like a victim of credit cards and debt, when I could say, you know what, Bank of America, I love you. Thank you for, even at 26%, interest, thank you for lending me and giving me a line of credit that allowed me to feed myself. And I'm going to eventually pay this back just to create the balance in my own life. And that's kind of a different story, but it really, when it gets down to understanding what love is, because a lot of times too, we talk about self-love and people will say, well, I don't want to do that because it doesn't feel good. Well, what aspect of you does it not feel good too? If you're on a diet, for example, it may not feel good to hop on an elliptical. It may not feel good to eat a salad. What may feel good is to, sit in the bathtub and eat a whole chocolate cake. But it only feels good in that moment to a certain aspect of you that is in resistance to creating everything that you want. So I think, again, within this global pause, one of the questions I've been asking of people is, if you talk in terms of co-creation, what aspects of yourself are you co-creating with? Are you co-creating with the part of you that is the shut down inner child? Are you co-creating with the part of you that is angry and feels victimized? Are you co-creating, or are you creating from the aspect that is allowing yourself to fall into, and we'll talk about sort of the conspiracy aspects of the world, and sort of the places where, rather than doing our own work and facing what's right in front of us, we want to sort of project and fight an imaginary foe, because it, in a sense, is easier than having to actually dig in and do the work in this physical space and create and be the change that love asks us to become.
So what I'd love to do is to synthesize many of the things that you've actually said, and to ask a question about what you would, going back retrospectively, what you would have liked to engender within us all during global pause that was missed out on or wasn't fully endorsed by the experience. And therefore, we didn't allow the experience to really permeate deep into the soma of our beings, into the physical nature of our beings. Just in a sentence, what would you like us to have been?
Still. Still. I think this is not a sentence. This will be more. Rather than being still, people became partially still, and then they felt into the vibration of who maybe they are at all of the unhealed levels, and sort of revolted against that stillness. And I think that's what created a lot of the feeling of being controlled, not wanting to wear a mask, for example, just simple things like that. that is where we then sort of went into a rage of now, we're going to politicize these different things, and we're going to again create the categories of other, and we're going to just take this as another opportunity to fight each other rather than to be still and come together as a one whole group of humanity and uplift each other and create something different. It became more about, again, well, your belief is this, my belief is this, and my belief trumps your belief, no pun intended. And I've talked before too, I gave this example because I know a lot of people will say, my heart tells me this, my gut tells me this. And, if I'd have grown up, well, the way I grew up, my heart, my gut told me a lot of things that I had to really unwind to understand why I would get those messages from what was really there. And if every time you ate a fresh piece of fruit or a fresh, anything, you got tased with a cattle prod. But every time you ate something rotten, you were left alone. If somebody put a plate of beautiful fresh fruit out in front of you, your gut would say, this is a trick, there's something wrong. It's not because there is anything wrong, but it's because the system you have created and been a part of or been exposed to has engendered that fear-based response. And so we really, within that global pause, there was an opportunity to understand what that was about. And rather than understand it, it was exploited and pushed into a whole new realm that just kind of made people collectively lose their shit.
Yeah, which was the fear. The fear of COVID, the fear of economic uncertainty, and the fear of what we were seeing in the major establishments, which are obviously governing systems that are no longer specifically serving us in terms of the way that we feel our lives, and all the mitigating circumstances of our lives. But instead of owning the fear, it seemed that what happened was that we shot the fear right up into our heads and immediately started engaging in opinionation, which social media permits because there's nobody sitting in front of one saying, do you really believe that? Or could you please be a little bit more precise? Or, whatever. There's no basic relationship being set up, although that's effectively the premise of what social media is all about, isn't it? So the fear became untold. And as a result of that, we suddenly latched onto conspiracy theory and found ways of being able to try and rationalize our fear rather than feeling our fear. I was very moved today. I don't know if you saw it on my Facebook page. I found a recent video of a group of young men and women around 17, 18 years of age in New Zealand, many of them Maori. Did you see it?
I didn't see it,
and
no.
there they are singing the haka, which is a ceremony and a warrior song in dispute of death, because one of their dear ones had died. A 17-year-old guy had died. And it's one of the most moving things. I mean, don't go and do anything about it now, people, because you're listening to us. But later you can actually scroll down. I can't remember which page I put it on. It was either Stewart Pearce, Master of Voice, or it was on just Stewart Pearce, the friend page. It's really moving. In other words, what they're doing immediately is engaging in the tribal ceremony of catharsis, releasing their mourning for their dear one. So the conspiracy theory, I know we talked about it in our pre-show chat, this conspiracy theory platforms have become excessively exaggerated, have they not? And it seems that there are many bitter things that are now emerging, which we touched on in our pre-show chat. And I wonder if we could go back into that space, because I feel it's revelatory for all of us to hear what that information is all about, in the sense of how we can identify it without being judgmental. And the identification is one of discernmental. And what does that really mean behaviorally? Because it can sound like clever semantics. And I know we defined it when we were talking. And I wondered if you could address that.
Yeah, so outside of the sort of the clever semantics, because, and that's such a thing that, I don't mean this in a negative way at all. It's just, it's an observational thing. And that's one of the things that both of us, we help people come to that space of observation. Because if you are again, taking it personally, even going back to like the Four Agreements and all of the great religions that sort of teach the ideation of oneness, but not oneness from the ego sense, oneness from the source sense. And, you know, even namaste, the divine in me, the divine in you, it's not the ego that is interacting. The space of discernment, one of the things that I said was feeling into the heart and, you know, what does love look like? What does love, that's why when you said hermit, I said, you know, we'll come back to that about the ideation, because one person can say liberty, and to one person, it might mean something wonderful and expressive and, you know, very prolific, and to another person, it means getting ready for a fight. And so to be able to feel into the space of what is love and why do we feel the way we feel about love, and how would love handle a situation? And I'll just use these as examples. You know, would love mock a disabled person? Would love continuously lie? Whether that love, I'll go into the conspiracy theory there, whether that love was secretly fighting to end, I'm going to use this number because I saw it in a meme, 300 million sex traffickers. And I said to somebody the other day, I think the birth rate in the US is 3.5 million a year. So what would that be? My math is bad. It would be 100 years. Every child born in the last 100 years would have immediately had to been snatched up. So some of these places we can actually use reason, particularly with that one. But the whole thing about the sex trafficking, for example, that caught on out of a lot of things that got thrown together with sort of supporting patriotism and all of these things. But if you go back through, there's always been the idea, it sort of just co-opted the idea of what the Illuminati were. It co-opted the idea of the Bilderberg group. It co-opted the idea that there is this massive force of other and evil, and only this person, this savior, is the only person that's going to truly roll it back and expose it so the whole world can magically awaken. Well, we know from the law of attraction, the world cannot magically awaken. We only exist within the same field of resonance wherein we vibrate. And so it's the space of looking at that and saying, okay, why do I believe all of these things? And when presented with fact, for example, someone said the other day, we were having this debate on Facebook. They said there are 100, they didn't say 100, they said there's 1 million children a year missing. So we went back and I sourced all of the different spaces, the Marshal Service, there's government sites. And if you don't trust the government, which I understand some people don't, there are individual groups like Thorn, which Ashton Kutcher runs, that gets people out of sex trafficking. There's the Walsh Foundation in America that was set up by Adam Walsh's father, John Walsh, who's very well known over here for his work with children. Globally reported, and I'm sure there are unreported statistics. And I'm just using this. I know some people are getting uneasy about this, but this is where you have to be able to say, I'm going to merge my brain and my heart. You know, there's a great thing that someone brought up the other day. They said, wherever two or more are gathered, I am there, meaning the Christed consciousness. And what I said was, you can also look at that as a parable of where when you marry the head and the heart, you emerge as the Christed being of the one that you are, because you have the reason and you have the love. And so there is no judgment, there is no dismissal. You are in that space where your entire field lights up, and you allow yourself to intellectually process what's before you from a space of non-reactivity. So looking at the statistics, for example, and this is for anybody that may have, because the memes are scary, Stewart. I mean, I've seen them, I've watched some of the videos and I've gone, if this is real, this is insanely crazy. Because what happens is people will give you just enough truth to ignite the fear. And I mean, this is mind control. I mean, people think mind control is the media, or they think mind control is a beam that's making them do things. Mind control is a very subtle thing that gets you to utilize your own beliefs and self-validation against your own better judgment and against the service of your own interest from that space of love. So looking at the statistics, there were 750,000 worldwide missing. 450,000 were in the US. Of those 450,000, 97% were found. Now, that still leaves us with about 12,000, 13,000 that never did. And one is too many. I mean, I fully agree with that statement. One missing child, one abused child is one too many. Yet when you have these people out there saying there are hundreds of millions of people, and it's always usually the Democrats or, you know, the elites, but elite just means it's the other, it's the people that think differently than me. And so we try to push that onto people when we can actually sit down and realize that fact and reason are not the enemy. nobody is the enemy. If we come from that space of love, we can have that discussion. So from that space, because I had shared an article where, and this was political, it's very clear, I said, I'm pro LGBTQ. Obviously, I said I'm not pro abortion, but I am pro choice. I don't believe as a man, I don't believe I should legislate whether a woman can take birth control and I said abortion was not, the passage of Roe versus Wade was not the legalization of abortion or the start of abortion. It was the ending of women dying. And I'm not the first one to say that, but it was the ending of women dying from unsafe practices. And so there are core issues like that one party in America stands for and wants to support, Medicare for all, the Obamacare, the Healthcare Act, that's going up before the Supreme Court in this next session, which is one of the reasons the things that are happening with the Supreme Court justices is so important and happening. And so if I've said this, if you're overweight, pre-existing condition, if you have taken a medication for anything, that's a pre-existing condition. And with where one party outlines in their platform, I'm not putting words in their mouth. You can go to, it would be the Republican website. You can look at basically if you go back to the convention, you can see all of the things that they want to institute. It would be a rollback of, there was an article today where Clarence Thomas came out and said the decision to let gay and lesbian, bisexual people marry, that they felt that was the wrong decision and that it would create actual more discrimination against people who thought that was wrong. So it's kind of like your right to exist discriminates against my right to discriminate against you, is basically what he was saying. And so this is why I think it's important to actually speak about it and not just talk in terms of, okay, I've had people say, well, you're just supposed to make us feel good, so just do that. If you trust, I said this to you, people who trust us with their infinite soul, they would ask us questions about, relationships that are the most important thing to them. But when it comes to voting, they don't want to hear it. And it's like, I understand that. I grew up in a very conservative home and having had different life experiences now, but I believe that you can support police while also condemning rioting. There is not this, and both parties do this to each other. They paint them in these extremes, and there are not the extremes. However, there are basic underlying fundamental belief structures in place. And so one of the things that started happening, and this started happening around 2015, was this idea of, and there was actually a bipartisan committee report, if anyone wants to look it up. It dropped around March, but didn't get any coverage because of COVID, where they talked about even the idea of groups like Q and things like that being part of that whole, where they, I don't want to say Russian because everybody goes, oh, here we go. But it was just the idea of propaganda starting to infiltrate. And so going back to the kids, what I was saying was, we have almost 12,000 kids that we just sent back across the border without parents. Those are real children that we can do something about by creating a change, rather than rallying on the internet and rather than going into a pizza parlor and shooting someone. We can literally create a new policy. That same amount of children that people are literally up in arms about and creating these huge movements around Save the Children. Again, that comes down to around 12,000 children who are not found, and that's in the US. Well, we just sent that exact amount back across the border without their parents. And we have more than that sitting in cages. So I'm just saying we need to start looking at the fundamental things that are actually, and I don't mean this in a negative way, that are real, the things that we can tangentially qualify versus the things that play on our fear and that prey on our belief systems and that keep us in a space of fighting each other. Because there is a space where, as you said, we were talking about kindness, and America needs kindness, America needs civility, and the whole world needs that. And so, are you willing to, I have friends that say, well, I'm going to vote this particular way, even though I know that it's going to harm my parents who are on Medicare. It's going to take away rights from my LGBTQ friends, even though maybe it won't. I'm not really worried that abortion's an issue, but I'll pay less taxes. And to them, I say, get a better CPA.
What is a CPA?
A certified public accountant. They would be the one who does your taxes in America.
Oh, about taxes, right. Because, So
because that's often a reason people use to support a little bit more of a fascist platform, because they just say, well, I'll make more money this way.
That is such a dangerous thought. And it concerns me hugely in the very core of me. It goes deep. That someone from a position of narcissism, just because it makes their taxes better, would disincline themselves to huge areas of society and therefore move towards such gross narcissism that there is the development of fascism. And it was troubling me all weekend. And, you know, I knew that it was brewing for something very, very major, which is partly to do with our conversation this evening. And so yesterday I watched a movie that was made probably about 10 or 12 years ago, all about Adolf Eichmann, who was the first major trial of an SS commandant who was one of Hitler's, you know, right hand or left hand, who exterminated 6 million people, not just Jews, but also Roman Gypsies, and those people that were alternatively abled, often considered to be mad, in those concentration camps. He was the first person that was brought to trial in Israel. And listening to the stories of those people who had experienced the sufferings, watching the films, I feel that this is what we all need to do, because they are harrowing when we see the cruelty of what fascism can bring about. You see people's bodies being disrespected, and oh, gosh, it really upsets me that what we're tantamount to being involved in is a reprise of what that was all about. And I say this publicly, that I will do absolutely everything in my might to make sure that that doesn't happen, even if it means that I have to stand, as I did in 1960 whatever, saying ban the bomb outside the US Embassy here in London. I will do whatever's necessary. I will walk 1,000 miles barefoot, whatever is necessary. We must not allow this to happen. And so to go back to your original definition, you see that as soon as we consume ourselves within narcissism, we're moving into that energetic furrow of what fascism is all about. And we have to really we have to ask some really serious questions. I wanted to share with you a quote which Marianne Williamson gave us, which I always think she has a really interesting way of being able to synthesize very complex moral issues into a very simple synthesis. This isn't a moment to try and escape the madness. We have to face it full on. It's a moment to participate in transforming it. The solutions aren't coming from the outside. Rather, it's our job to provide them from shifts within ourselves. You are a contributor. You are a co-creator. You are a participant in a huge wave of energy by which the American people and the people of the world will reject the madness of fascism and bring forth an historic course correction. The clock is ticking. There's not a lot of time left, but it's not just midnight. And so we can definitely do this. We have time. A giant is awakening in all of us, and the weeks ahead will be like nothing we've ever seen before.
I love
Yay!
that. Yeah.
I'll send you to. I mean, I've slightly cobbled a much broader essay that she wrote. The major substrata of American society and the world, because we look to you for democratic leadership. That there is something happening in terms of how we can dent the moral fiber of the USA by a position of love, which is infinitely greater than anything else. We just need to cease all the opinionation.
Yeah,
it's very simple. It's very simple. As one would corral the children, we need to cease all the opinion. Well, I think this and I think that. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Can we find a way of being able to streamline that expression so that it's not frustrated, it's not imploded, it's not suppressed, it's not constricted, it's not contracted, but find another way of being able to bring about the issue of the way that we can use our hearts to heal this process.
Well, and I want to touch on that because there are perspectives, right? There's and this is a way, again, if we don't really fully know ourselves, and again, that's not a judgment. That's just the more we know ourselves, the more we recognize these things at play, the more we can see all of the perspectives. There's a great meme, and it's meant to illustrate how, we can hold different beliefs because we all have a different perception. It's basically, it's a 6 or a 9, depending on where you're looking at it. One person's yelling, that's a 6, and one person's yelling, you're wrong, that's a 9. Okay, that's what we're talking about. But in that space, there's also opinionation, because you can pull out to the level of the observer who's seeing that meme and say, I see why this person sees a 6. I see why this person sees a 9. Can we explain it to everyone involved so that we can all sit down from a space of love and say, okay, if I'm coming from a space of an open heart, and I'm coming from a space of, again, wanting to love everyone, which means for me anyway, this means I want everyone to have access to healthcare. I want people I want there to be a safety net for people. I want people to be able to live the life that they choose to live. Again, not harming anyone else, not harming themselves, but being able to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
Be in that space and explain, okay, this is the noise from this side. This is the noise from this side. And this is the factual space that we can all find the common ground in. And even if we don't necessarily agree with it, understand there is a place in us that has a story about why we don't agree with it. And can we come together, again, the narcissistic part, I would just say, can we step out of the self-interest? Because that can really, it starts off as, I'm on the side in power, I'm going to do what is in my interest. Well, then when that side loses power, well, now we're in power, we're going to slam you, and it's going to be just as awful. And it becomes this tit for tat. And I'll use my mom as the example. I shared that she has coronavirus right now, but she also has a couple of conditions that her medication is a few $100s a month, because Oklahoma opted out. We were one of a few states that opted out of receiving some of the Affordable Care Act money. Now, she voted for the person who opted out of that, and she supports that person. And I tried to explain to her that, she doesn't have any money coming in, so she doesn't have to worry about taxes, none of these things. Her sole reason for voting is based along some ideology, which, if we actually sat down to have a conversation, I don't mean this again in a judgmental way, you could very easily shatter that illusion of what she's saying factually by just saying, here are the statistics, here are the facts, and I love it when she says, well, whose facts are those? And so then we can go, okay, well, here are all of the groups, and here are the people you enjoy that also support that, this is what we're looking at. But she actually has come to a place of, spending her whole life in a much different economic situation than she finds herself in now, voting this way, that she continues to vote because she hopes to somehow get back into that place, that she's actively voting against her own self-interest. And that's the thing that we all have to realize, is that what's best for, and it's not one size fits all. So I don't mean what's best for everyone is what's best for me, because what's best for you may be a size 38 suit. What's best for me, that might be a little tight. But I mean, what's best in the sense of just providing a space of love and acceptance and growth for all, and not feeling like someone else's gain is our loss. And that's something that has been lost in the world.
Yes, yes. And so we're really calling for heart transmission to take place. We're really asking people to cease all of the chaotic opinionation and to come back deep into their hearts and feel. So the only way that we can actually do this is by firstly stepping back, detaching, feeling the stillness, and then observing, so that we can really begin to understand, well, how can I better this person? Not by competing with them or arguing against them, but how can I actually be kind? How can I be loving? How can I be compassionate? On Saturday, I had 4 clients who came to see me personally here in my studio in London. And they were all conspiracy theorists. And when they entered, they didn't see me. They entered ungraciously. And they began, as I was inquiring, how are you? What can I do for you? They began their oration, which went on and on and on. And I timed each one of them. They spoke at me for half an hour. And then I stopped and said, okay, you're spending a lot of money on this session, aren't you? And they said, yeah, you are rather expensive. And I said, well, that's because I'm an expert. And so let me have an opportunity to provide you with an energy exchange, because you're just going to go on and on and on and on and on. And it seems to me that deep underneath your conspiracy theorizing is rampant anger. When was the last time you went into the community where you live and helped people? And they said, what? And I said, when was the last time you decided 10 compassionate acts for your community, whether it was holding a door open for a pregnant mama who has a buggy and a babe in the buggy, standing and helping a senior citizen as she approaches the moving staircase, the escalator, helping somebody who looks lost, going to somebody in the environment and knocking on their, who maybe is a senior citizen or somebody who's living alone, and knocking on their door or ringing their doorbell and saying, I'm sorry, I know you don't know me from Adam, but is there anything that I can do for you? Is there any grocery shopping that, can I make you a cup of tea? What compassionate act? Have you written love letters anonymously to people in your community, which is something that I know John Burgos and I talked about, just, dear friend, do you realize how much significance you have in the community in which you live? I want you to know that we are regarding you and we love you. And we want your life to be filled full of abundance and good health and well-being and as much love as you can savor. And we're just watching you, okay? So the universe is behind you and willing you, desiring for you that everything is going to be okay in your life. Sign, love a friend, and then putting that into an envelope and sticking it underneath their windscreen wipers. I'm going on, but just very, very simple, compassionate acts rather than engaging in all of this unnecessary egoic competition.
Yeah, one of the simplest things that you can do, and I got a nickname, I've shared this before, when I first moved out to Los Angeles, I was at the William Morris Agency, and after about maybe 6-7 months, I was at a studio and I was recording, and a lady came out who had the same agency, and we started talking, and she said, we have a nickname for you. And I thought, oh gosh, that's usually not a good thing, right? And she said, we call you HGL, behind your back. And I mean, that sounds like an STD to me. So I thought, oh God, what is that? What have I done? What does this mean? And she said, it means happy-go-lucky, because you always walk in with a smile. You always look everybody in the eye. You always say hi. And these were just things that, I bet in LA, it was not something people did. You didn't make eye contact at the grocery store and smile at people. But these are things that you can do that smile may change the course of that person's day, because you've just granted them a moment of humanity. And even if, I know somebody will say, well, if I'm wearing a mask, I can't smile. You can hold a door, you can wave to a baby. You can, with your eyes, you can send that energy. There are so many things that we can do to just fill the space with love. And so again, one of the things you and I talked about was just kind of stepping back and feeling into what real love is, because a lot of us didn't grow up with real love. We grew up with conditional, judgmental bemoanment and called that love. But and so that's kind of why we look to that archetype sometime to lead, because that's ingrained in us as that's what strength is. Strength is not kindness and compassion. But when we can realize that real strength comes from a space of being able to have everything in the world thrown at you and still meet the world with an open heart, and not let that turn you bitter or sour or allow you to turn people against each other, but bring people together and unite people. When we can step into that space individually as well, we can really truly create the better world that so many people in the energetic community are wanting to create, but they're waiting for a celestial event. And I am here to tell you that you are that celestial event. We so often say, yes, we so often say to people, yeah, we say you matter. Well, what you do also matters. And we've kind of forgotten that, because again, we say I matter, but we take it on in the egoic sense of I should have everything I want. And then we get angry when the universe doesn't deliver, but we forget that it's law of attraction. So it's where we resonate. And in order to move into that space of abundance, we have to basically be in a space of shared abundance and realize again, I'm going to stop because I think you could have stopped me when you said that. We're looking for the celestial event, and you are that celestial event.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And so we're really talking about those moral fibers that keep our lives safe, secure, abundant, and full of love. Do as you would be done by. And
Yes.
that if we bring about a transgression against somebody, whether it's through a malicious thought, through a cruel jibe, a disdaining, ignorant gesture, such as letting a door slam into somebody's face simply because we're not looking behind, whatever the behavior is, that we're actually not just maligning the individual or the individuals that we're engaged with, we're actually tearing a veil in heaven that is associated with our own souls. Because if someone else pains, we will pain with them. And this is a time evidently of chaotic karmic resolution. And I just was reminded of earlier when I was thinking about our possible journey this evening, the great statement of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said that the moral arm of the universe is long, but it always bends towards justice. And so we're seeing gross perpetration on our screens at the moment of malignant behaviors that are a form of cancer. But actually, very quickly, we're going to see how karma also comes into exactly. And so, I feel that we all need to be really responsible as we step forward to allow the possibility or indeed the probability of that celestial functioning taking place. You shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. Well, the kingdom of heaven is here. So we need to start thinking in these terms. I just want to open up to anybody who, because there are hundreds of people listening in, but does anybody have a question? You're all leaving wonderful comments, which I'm sort of, as I'm listening to Jarrad, I'm reading. Please don't write reams, just leave a simple question. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask about the moral fiber that we're talking about, so that we can arrest our behaviors and become infinitely more responsible for the love and the care and the honesty and the generosity and the compassion and the inclusivity? Anybody? Question: has there ever been anyone or a situation, that you struggled to love, and how did you overcome this? Oh, all the time.
I literally was gonna say, God, yes. I'll give the example of my own dad. He was very abusive. He threw me out of the house when I was 14, which I don't know if I've ever shared that publicly. We did not get along. To say he hated me might be an overstatement, but that he did not like me. And he was an alcoholic. He was a drug addict, but he had great standing in the community. I think I could probably say I felt hatred. I felt deep hatred from him. And as he progressed, other people thought it was just, it's the alcohol, it's this. And I saw through that and said, no, there's something really wrong with him. It needs to be addressed. And nobody would do it because everyone was afraid of him. And so I went to court and I got an emergency order and I took the sheriff. I went down to get him. I brought him to the hospital. And I take care of him like I'm his guardian. And I have fallen in love with that man over the last few years because he has changed. The dynamic has changed. I struggled very much in my relationship with him, but I can also say that from a sense of understanding that I came into this life, I believe that for whatever reason I chose to have the relationship and the parents, because everything that I experienced brought me to a space of either having to fold to it or rise to it. And there were times that I folded, but every time I folded, the universe just brought more momentum to push against that and gave me more contrast until eventually I said enough and I faced it. And that's really what's going on in society today. But my dad is the perfect example of that. My siblings, it's taken them years to even talk to him. And I'm at a space where, I can talk to him daily and actually without any kind of charge, sometimes I will actually get teary talking about him because that's the love that I feel. But that was a journey of going, and there's moments all the time where people will be abrasive, or people will, there are situations that arise all the time. And that's why, we also talk about conscious creation. And I've used the analogy before that we all sort of want the easy button. And again, the great irony is that we are the easy button, and we have to construct that easy button through our actions and through our beliefs and through integrating all of these spaces. And once we get to that space, that doesn't mean that it's always easy. I shared earlier that my dad had a fall. We had to call 911. My mom got coronavirus. That was this weekend. So there are things in my life that are, I would say, probably we would call stressful. But I can also step back, and I can also still love, and I can also allow, while also moving in to help in ways that are much more, I don't mean detached in a like psycho kind of way, but detached from the old stories of, you did this or you did that, and now I have to do this or I have to do that. It's because I love these people, and I can love those people in a way because I also start to realize that part of that is me putting that out into the universe, saying, I believe that, and it does, I've been greatly given to in my life, spiritually, emotionally, and, now in my own practice and books and all of these things, I've had really great success. But it wasn't until I gave up the ideation of how I was going to get there. But I really do believe that the more love you put out, the more it creates and does come back to you, and it comes back to everyone. And I again believe that I want to be the change that I want to see in the world, and that whatever that is, even if it's a small increment, it shifts the entirety of the whole.
Well, just by your story, we can see, as we reflect on all that you've just shared with us, that your care was the redeeming function. I mean, you were literally exploring, without consciously trying to attain it, the pathway of redemption. And as a result, your dad changed, and your love, your hatred is turned into love, purely and simply because you explored the muscle of care and kindness and compassion and generosity. It's very
simple. Is a
simple.
muscle. It is a muscle.
Yeah. These are, I feel fundamentally that these are all attitudinal muscles that we just simply, in the busyness of doing, in all of the stressfulness of our lives, that we've simply forgotten what the definition is. And so I would suggest boldly that the era of data collection is now over. And that what we need to do is realize that we have all of the information, but we need to allow it to seep in our bodies. Stop reading the books. But Jarrad and I would carry on writing books, right? Because that's what we do. And allow the information to seep deeply in so that we can actually develop a feeling literacy. I just want to flick. We're running over time, which is amazing because it feels like we've only just started. I just wonder if there are any other questions. Thank you for sharing, blah, blah, very sweet of you, but any questions? How do I let go of my own fear of giving fully, of letting go of self-protection? Well, that doesn't really make sense, Candice, to be honest. It's, you're asking about 5 different questions in one simple one. We need to go into a very thorough understanding about what you mean by that. Wow. Explore the muscle of care, compassion, kindness. Oh, I just said that. Attitudinal muscles. Why are you writing what I've said?
I will say this about, I don't see the box, so I'm not seeing questions, but what Candace said about.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. But just the idea itself of self-protection and letting go. Look at what you believe you are protecting yourself from. Look at what you believe you need to be protected from. These are the places that we get those mental hooks in, and can kind of pull us away into our fear. When we realize that I am an infinite, divine, eternal soul living this physicalized, individualized existence, what is there to be afraid of? Sure, there are things that, if you punch me in the face, I'm not going to appreciate it. I'm not going to like it. Can I learn from it? Maybe. Please don't do it. But it goes back into, what are the expectations? What are your boundaries? What are you creating for yourself as a whole? It's funny that we were just talking about my dad, and he just text messaged me, "I love you." I don't know if show up on the phoner.
Did you hear that, everybody?
Anyway,
Just say that again so that everybody can really hear.
My dad just text messaged me, "I love you."
Okay. I feel, you see, I feel, Jarrad, I feel that's God speaking. That's just absolutely amazing. I feel that that is God. I know it's your dad in human form, but I feel that that is God.
Oh, just the synchronicity of discussing that, and then
just there's the magic. And so all of the other questions just evaporate, don't they? Because all we need to do is to explore the muscle of what our loving is all about. This has been the most amazing, amazing time. Jarrad, I don't want you to leave, stay where you are. But
okay.
Unfortunately, everybody, we've run over our time excitingly. And I know that you're all going to want me to invite him back because he's really, really extraordinary. I want to say, well, I know Jarrad will as well, we love you. Thank you for coming and listening to us. Leave all sorts of lovely questions in the chat box and I'll pick them up later and see if I can do. And yes, I will share with you the quotes and I've got other things to do that. Now, if you want to find out, you don't know Jarrad and you want to find out who he is, where he is, his website is, Jarrad?
www.jarradhewett.com, and it's JARRADHEWETT.com.
Okay, everybody, and go to both our YouTube accounts, click on everything that you possibly can, and I look forward to seeing you next week with our next communication. Bless you. Much love. Stay where you are there, Jarrad.